It's Sally Loftus, and I'm the author of the Fully Human Resources newsletter on LinkedIn. And today I'm joined by my colleague, Myrna Jelman, to have a discussion about leadership in this era of organizational upheaval. I'm excited that I'm here today with my colleague, Myrna Jelman. And instead of me introducing her, I'm going to let Myrna introduce herself. Welcome today.
Thank you, Sally. It's a pleasure being here. Who am I? Well, you can hear the slight accent. So I'm French Algerian living in London, and I've been a consultant almost my whole life, based around humanistic psychology principles, but then applying them to all sorts of challenges in organizations. In my early days, internal communications and organizational research, then organizational change, but then moving on to a lot of leadership development work, which ended up being my passion because I could take people away from their normal environment and show them that the world could be different, and then hopefully return them with some tools and some new friends. I also do executive coaching, and I've run large group and designed large group events. And I'm getting interested in new things, which is part of what I'll be talking about here today.
Thank you, Myrna. I appreciate it. You know, the theme of this newsletter kind of overall is fully human resources. And I named it that because I see so much of humanity being sucked out of the workplace. And it's not about technology or anything like that. It's just that people find that they can't bring their full selves to work. They may have to kind of put something aside to be in their workplace to thrive. And so there's been a lot of upheaval happening in the last few years. And I'm curious, kind of in your work, what are you seeing that's happening in the workplace right now?
Mm-hmm. Um, I'm seeing the same old things that have happened before, but with more intensity, I think, because of more pressures. I think we're still not learning the lessons of how to take care of humans in organizations. And the invitation to join this newsletter made me think of the things I typically see, and I've made a list. And I think they're the sort of beliefs we have and practices we have in organizations we need to change. So I'm just going to read it, blind as a bat these days.
Yeah.
So we believe people can't take the truth, so we don't give them feedback. We believe strategy is king and making things happen is junior. We believe that if you convey a thought, it can motivate people or reassure them, like you'll be fine, or you need to be more strategic, as if that could help people actually do something different. We believe hierarchy is the only way to organize ourselves out of chaos. We don't think that there's any other way to organize ourselves. We can leave our conscience at the door at work, because rules about performance remove the need to use it. If you comply to what is set, then surely you'll be fine and you don't need to worry about it. We think change can always be designed and planned and predicted. We think still targets motivate people.
Mm,
We think resistance to change is lack of willingness to move.
mm,
We think it's not normal to have hurt feelings in relationships and that others should understand us. We believe the worst of other people, but we always mean well. We think emotions and feelings are negative things to be avoided.
mm,
And we believe it's normal to be exploited in organizations as a price to pay for safety or an illusion of safety. And we believe we can't expect to be happy in organizations.
wow.
So, yeah, I enjoyed making that list last night, thinking actually these things I've seen for my last 25 years, and they're getting worse. I'm seeing people feeling quite tired, I think. I mean, I'm imagining you've seen that as well, and it's a sort of fundamental tiredness, lassitude with organizational life, a bit of a lack of hope. And what worries me most is that people have disconnected and worked virtually, but not just work virtually. They just don't go back to having those friendships at work as much as they perhaps did. So we're still in limbo. And I
Mm,
think that if you're an optimist, you think, well, the need behind what human beings are experiencing, this pain and this sorrow, means that something new can emerge if we just work at it.
What an incredible list of things that I know I've also seen in my own work,
Hmm.
internally with organizations and externally as a consultant. So thank you for kind of putting words to that. And I'm excited for us to unpack that.
Hmm.
So, considering kind of what's happening in our workplaces, what are some principles people can use to kind of see these dynamics change?
Yeah. And these are the principles I think should be almost part of our education at a certain age, definitely for young
Mhm.
professionals, just things that we should all know. We shouldn't have to learn them as middle-aged leaders in organizations where only a small number of people can have access to that. Um, and um, and they're all linked to how we're designed as human beings. So um, the first one is linked to um, which one's my first slide? I'll just share my screen with you. There you go. Psychological safety. So we need psychological safety in anything we do in order to be able to function and be at our best. And we've heard quite a lot about it in recent years. There's various definitions, but basically a simple version is people need to feel they're safe to belong, they're accepted in the group, they're safe to learn and ask questions, especially when they first arrive, they're safe to contribute ideas without fear of embarrassment or ridicule, and more importantly, the last level, they're safe to question others' ideas or ways of doing things. And to me, that's quite an important one if you want to have organizations that are responsible, well governed, and fair in their practices. So that's one of the first principles, and it doesn't tell you how to do it. So I also like to share work from David Rock, a neuroscientist who identified the 5 social needs that we all have, that if they are not met, our brain will make us behave as if a lion's chasing us. Uh, and we know it. We know it to be true. We see reactions in other people's eyes when we say, "Can I have a chat?" If you're the leader and you're asking a team member, "I want to give you some feedback," your amygdala will give you a big shot of adrenaline or whichever chemical will come into your body, course into your veins, and you will have that experience of stress. In order to help human beings and all of us to function at our best, we need to pay attention to anything that might threaten people at those 5 levels. Threaten their sense of status, threatens their sense of certainty, autonomy, and they need to have a sense of control over their tasks, something that we still don't implement in any organization. And I'll make a pause here. Clients sometimes say, well, I want the latest research and I want the latest model. And sometimes I say to them, why do you want the latest? You still haven't implemented the models from the 50s or the 70s. We know people need autonomy. We've known it for decades, but we don't know how to apply it. So that's a different question in my view. Relatedness, we all need to really belong to a group and to feel accepted. So this links back a little bit to the psychological safety. And fairness, a perceived fairness being rewarding and a perceived unfairness being threatening. And to give you an example of the importance of these, I have a lovely coaching story. I often tell people if I run a coaching development program, which is I was brought in to help a manager who, for the last few years, had just not really given his all to his team and had let things drift a little bit, which meant that there was even a sort of race tribunal issue within his team because he hadn't paid attention. And I was brought as a resource, just 3 coaching sessions to help him. And what transpired in the first session was that he kept talking about what happened 7 years ago when he applied for a job interview that he didn't get. He was the acting person for 2 years, replacing someone, and he didn't get the job because somebody of a different race was prioritized. And then that happened twice. So over a period of 4 years, he covered the job twice, and he got
Mhm.
promoted over his head twice. And I remember thinking, we're supposed to be planning for the future here, and he's spending, a lot of his time
Mhm.
talking about the last 7 years in detail.
Mhm.
But then at the end of the session or at some stage, I said the one sentence that unlocked 7 years of poor performance in this guy. And I said, if I were you, I'd be angry too. The next time I showed up, he had a plan for what he was going to do with his team. He had changed things already. There was no need for coaching anymore. And I think we don't understand human beings are built this way. So
Mm.
I think there's a lot of subtlety that we can discover. And paying attention to these five are a great start. If you are a leader and you design events or you are managing a change, do a little checklist and think who's going to be threatened in terms of status, certainty,
Mm.
autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. How can I flip it to be a little more helpful? So that's a second principle. But it's not enough because as human beings, okay, so now we are talking to each other, but we need to work in teams as well. And I've only discovered this recently, and I love it, by Patrick Lencioni, The Five Behaviors of a Cohesive Team. And it came from the research he did on the five dysfunctions of teams. And what I love is that it builds up and it says, without the bottom fundamental part of the pyramid, you can't have the next level. Without trust, you can't have conflict. And you'd say, but who would want conflict? That's the last thing you want in organizations. I think, no, that's the thing you want. You want to disagree, but very respectfully in order to have the differences of opinion, the awareness of the risk that you might be taking as an organization, the opportunities for growth. You want to have discussion and conflict. Without conflict, you can't really have commitment because you haven't put your oar in, you haven't stated your view, you haven't had a chance to have your mind changed because one person states another view and you go, oh my God, yeah, never thought of it. And without commitment, of course, you don't have accountability. And we all know without accountability, it's very hard to get the results we need. So these three models, creating psychological safety in order to have that trust and conflict, basically, and being aware of what holds us back in our brain, very simple things that will trick you into not being able to fulfill this pyramid if you don't pay attention to these things. So those are a few things.
I really appreciated all three of those examples. I've read actually all the books on those, and so it was great to kind of see them
Mhm.
folded together in how we can use those within the workplace. So I'm curious, Myrna, like what are some examples maybe you've seen in your own
Mhm.
work or places you've worked where these kinds of principles can change things?
Yeah. And my one of my favorite programs of all times was one I run with colleagues for DSM, the life sciences company from the Netherlands. And we did a program for their experienced managers. So these were people who were not on the global talent pipeline. They were the backbone of the organization, and they were not expected to rise through too many more ranks of the organization, but they wanted people to transform and support the strategic objectives of the organization, which were quite ambitious. So we designed a program where we could give them this safe adult to adult space, culture and space, where they could be themselves, where they could have space to reflect on their real challenges. We never worked with anything fake. And accompany them in learning some relational leadership skills, and a few other experiences, sharing their
Mm.
perspectives on the organization. And because we loved this program so much, the three of us on the team decided to, for free, do an evaluation of impact of this program because we knew something special was happening. So 8 years after the first program run, so it was only 1 year after the last program run because we run it annually, we didn't interview, we sent a questionnaire to the participants who were still there and the line managers of the participants who still were in that same dyad. And what was amazing to see was the quantitative sort of measures of change as well as the some of the lovely quotes we had. So in terms of quantitative, the biggest impact was on confidence. So the participants said they had a 46% increase in confidence in their
Wow.
leadership role, and their line managers said it was a 48%. And very often the line managers saw more change than the participants did, which was really
Mm.
interesting. And I'll just read a few of the quotes. It just gives you a sense of how trustworthy those people are. These people should be trusted. They are very experienced managers. They were maybe a little bit demotivated, tired, all those things we have said, the post COVID lassitude, disconnection. You just will do every day, a bit like you did the previous year, and nothing is rocking your boat anymore. But these people changed. I learned to engage with people and started enjoying that. Because of this, I was able to be more myself. Because I'm behaving more authentically nowadays, this leads to better results, having better and more trustful relationships, having more fun in work, being more inspirational to others. Another one said, in retrospect, my character has changed. I'm more open now than I used to be. I inform peers and team members about motivations for my policies and actions, but also in my personal environment. I see myself listening to people in another way. I explore backgrounds of thoughts that make people say and do the things they say and do. So I find it amazing that when we know how to help people transform, and this was, uh, 2 modules of 4 days in the first iteration and then became 1 module of 5 days. It's not a big investment. We can transform people, and for the next 8 years, they are embodying what we care that people embody in organizations. Why are we not doing it more often? And I think there is something where we don't, I said we don't believe we can be happy in organizations. I think we have very low expectations of what organizations can be. And I think we
Mhm.
need to raise those expectations a lot. And for anyone who's listening who is a manager or a leader, especially if you're new to people management, there are great resources out there. And one of them that I really love is called Liberating Structures. And it's free resources. It basically collates together a lot of the techniques that we OD consultants, facilitators use with clients to design events to make those environments where people can thrive. And you can try them yourselves, basically, and you can adapt them and you can find the ones that you like. 33 methods that can help you to lead and lead your teams in a more humane way, enjoy yourself more. So I would say that and learning basic coaching skills. I mean, I still love helping people develop coaching skills. We don't learn how to listen, how to ask good questions, how to give clear feedback, and how to state our needs or intentions. And to this day, I now think this should start probably at school when people are teenagers. They would probably love learning how to express their emotions and have a place to be heard. Their mental health needs it. So if anybody's listening who is interested in exploring that as well, I'm up for that.
Thank you for those insights. I really appreciated that you brought forward liberating structures. I have found that I use those frequently with groups, and even I've used them virtually.
Mm-hmm.
And, a couple I've used are 1, 2, 4, all and what, so what, now what, as ways to help people kind of synthesize information outside
Mm-hmm.
the traditional, like large group format, right? It really
Mm-hmm.
gets people talking. So obviously you have a lot of passion in this area, and there's a lot of things, new things that are still happening in this field.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious to hear kind of where are you headed now? What do you see happening in the future?
Yeah, and thank you for that question because I think I'm at a sort of turning point, and I hope the world also is at a turning point, the organizational world at least. Um, so, from helping people develop adult to adult cultures, even if they embrace it and deliver it around them like those lovely DSM managers did, I think it's not enough. We need to have adult to adult cultures in adult to adult structures, or human cultures in human structures. And there's a big, exciting field of all sorts of different people looking at new ways of working. And I've been learning about that and actually forging partnerships and associations with a whole network of consultants in Europe interested in this field. And some are in, you know, can do the strategy bit, some can do purpose, some can do new ways of working, some can do all sorts of other things. So I'm excited about that. And um, the different models that are coming through are all linked to changing the way we organize ourselves in organizations. So I'll say a few names of the methods, but they're not necessarily in an order. So the first one I talk about is not the one I care most about. It will be the last one, but it's a fundamental step in the build. So sociocracy, for example, is a way of organizing teams in a structure where you have circles. So a team is a circle, is accountable for a very clear task, might have a sub-circle, and because you need cooperation and information flows, you have two people who belong to both circles as a way of making people coordinate. Within these circles, people have very well-planned meetings. That's the bit of the turn-off in my view, but they're very efficient. So anybody who wants efficiency can use some of the sociocracy ways of doing meetings. To give you an idea, it's not complicated, but if you're trying to explore an issue, you do a simple thing as called rounds. Everybody has a chance to say
Mhm.
one feedback and
Mhm.
raise a question or an issue. And that means there's an equal participation. It's as simple as that. And sociocracy is great because it gives you a simplicity and you go, oh, of course. One of the more scary things people think about for sociocracy is that people identify the roles people need to do in these circles. They're not job descriptions, they are emergent roles as the organization needs it. Now we need somebody who actually does a big campaign in marketing. So create a role that has very clear boundaries, and the person is accountable for very clear tasks and has clear decision-making rights.
Mhm.
And they are voted into that role. And even the voting process is very clear. You nominate people. I won't go into the detail, but that's the bit where people go, oh, that's a bit now way too, scary for me. But, read about it if you want to see how simple those structures are. Then there's a second group of people linked to new ways of working. I mean, one of the ones I like because the book is so engaging is the people from the Ready. And Aaron Dignan wrote the book Brave New Work a few years ago. It's a extremely clearly written and engaging and makes you think, oh, yes, we can change things. And they encourage basically organizations to redesign their operating system. And they have a map of 12 different elements of the system. So the way you do meetings, the way you do remuneration, for example. Um, and they say, start always with identifying what stops us from doing our best work. Identify the tensions. Identify practices that you can brainstorm might help us move on, and then do experiments. Do safe to fail
Mhm.
experiments. And this is the thing that in organizations we still haven't understood. Organizational growth is not from A to B, it's circular. It's
Mhm.
loops of experiment, and we still don't believe in action research and all those good things. But the sort of world from agile sociocracy, new ways of working is bringing that back, and I think the newest generations have maybe more of that in their psyche. So the ready people working in new ways of working have lots of little ways that are starting to emerge as a global culture actually. So things like checking in at the start of
Mhm.
meetings, doing a round where everybody says how they are because it builds trust back to psychological safety and relatedness and doing retrospectives. So actually looking, how did we work, and saying it openly. If you practice it and you know it's going to happen at the end of almost every meeting or every big bit of a project, you're more likely to say something tricky. It doesn't stay and putrefy for months. You'll just find it easier to say. They have a great and that comes from not just them, I don't think, a process for decision making. And I think it's one of the key levers for anybody looking at new ways of working is clarify who has the power to make those decisions and who has responsibilities because they have that power. So they mention an advice process, which is asking for consent, not consensus. That
Mhm.
basically one person can make a decision and has all the rights, all the power
Mhm.
possible. However, they have the responsibility of asking advice from anybody who's impacted by the decision and or has both actually and has expertise. So anybody who is an expert needs to be asked. And then they can reject the advice if they want to. They record their decision, communicate it, communicate the rationale for it, and it can be challenged later on, but the decision is made. And that allows for more agile organizations. And I think that's something people can start as well. Um, I wrote an article on sustainability and purpose 10 something years ago, and I coined the term leaderhood. And I said organizations need to become leaderhoods, environments where leadership thrives. And I think those new ways of working are very much moving towards that. And you can really see how all the things I talked about before actually supports, then, with this structure people can fly. And this leads me to the last thing I want to say, which is my favorite models of new ways of organizing, which is the teal movement. Teal as a color, it's linked to an evolutionary model of progression that is color based. And basically it means organizations that are self-managed, therefore trust people to do this, create roles, destroy roles as and when needed, decide how the best way to work is for a certain mission. Wholeness, so people are allowed to be their full self, including changes of motivation. As human beings, we will get bored even if we function at our best. Ask me in 5 years, I'll be bored of this and I'll have moved to something else. If I don't, then I'm not growing. So let's work with that instead of against that. And finally, and most importantly, not just that, because that would mean an inward facing organization that is happy and well functioning, but evolutionary purpose, which is
Mm.
the people in the organization are constantly sensing what their organization is best suited to do in the world, in society, for meeting needs, whatever those needs are. And those organizations, I think, for me, are the organizations that might save us or show us a role model for where to go in future, when so much of our society, ecology, economy, mental health is at risk as a human race. So I have hope because there is an energy towards these things, and I'm grateful to you, Sally, for inviting me to talk here, because it means maybe that enthusiasm can go. And I'll leave with one thought, which
Mhm.
is, in the natural world, ecologists are reminding us that when we leave an ecosystem to its own devices, it will regenerate, and nature will will grow back, trees will come back, and the right insects and birds and the right interactions. And I think it's the same with human beings. If we provide the right conditions, then we can grow again. And I think we deserve it. We have had a shock. Let's try and reorganize ourselves in future for something that can help us thrive.
That was incredible. I kind of want to give you a standing ovation, which I wouldn't do, but thank you so much, Myrna. I really appreciate your sharing this with me. I feel like I've been at school today. And so thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.